Welcome back to Cloudcast. I'm your network ninja, and today we're tackling a topic that caused a major outage at a fintech company I consulted for last year. They had VPCs in US East 1 and EU West 1, connected through Transit Gateway interregion peering, and everything looked perfect on paper.
Let me guess, something went horribly wrong with the routing.
Exactly. They had asymmetric routing that caused their stateful firewalls to drop legitimate traffic. Packets went out through one path and came back through another, and their security appliances had no idea what to do with response packets that didn't match any known connection.
That sounds like a nightmare to troubleshoot. So today we're diving into Transit Gateway interregion peering and how to avoid those kinds of disasters?
Precisely. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to architect multi-region routing that's predictable, efficient, and won't wake you up at 3 a.m. We'll cover the routing mechanics, latency implications, and the specific configurations that trip people up.
Perfect. But let's start at the beginning. What exactly is Transit Gateway interregion peering? And why would I use it instead of just setting up VPN connections between regions?
Great question. AWS Transit Gateway is a regional network hub that lets you connect VPCs and on-premises networks through a central point. Inter-region peering extends this by connecting transit gateways in different AWS regions over AWS's private backbone network.
So it's like having a central train station in each city, and then building a high-speed rail line between those stations?
That's actually a solid analogy. Each transit gateway is your regional hub, and the peering connection is that dedicated rail line. The key advantage over VPN is that traffic stays on AWS's backbone, which means consistent latency and bandwidth. You're not traversing the public internet.
But wait, couldn't I just use VPC peering between regions? Why do I need Transit Gateway at all?
VPC peering works great for simple architectures, but it doesn't scale. VPC peering is non-transitive, meaning if VPC appears with VPC-B and VPC-B peers with VPC-C, traffic from A cannot reach C through B. With Transit Gateway, you attach all your VPCs to the hub, and the hub handles the routing.
Ah, so with 10 VPCs in each region, I'd need 90 VPC peering connections just within one region, versus 10 attachments to a single Transit Gateway.
Exactly right. The formula for full mesh VPC peering is n times n minus 1 divided by 2. With Transit Gateway, it's just an attachments. Now, let's talk about how routing actually works with inter-region peering.
Yes, please. I've seen route tables in the console, but I'm not entirely sure how they interact across regions.
Each transit gateway has its own route tables, and this is crucial. Routes do not automatically propagate across the peering connection. If you have a VPC with CIDR 10.1.0.0 out of 16 attached to your transit gateway in US East 1, that route exists in the US East 1 transit gateway route table, but it won't magically appear in EU West 1.
So I have to manually create static routes pointing to the peering attachment?
Correct. In your EU West 1 transit gateway route table, you'd add a static route for 10.1.0.0 out of 16 with the target being the peering attachment to US East 1. This is documented in the AWS Transit Gateway documentation under Transit Gateway Peering Attachments.
That seems error-prone. What if I add a new VPC in US East 1 and forget to update the route table in EU West 1?
You've just identified one of the most common operational mistakes. The new VPC would be unreachable from EU West 1. This is why infrastructure as code is essential. You define your routes in Terraform or CloudFormation, and any new VPC attachment triggers a pipeline that updates all relevant route tables.
Let me make sure I understand the packet flow. If an EC2 instance in EU West 1 VPC wants to reach an instance in US East 1 VPC, what's the actual path?
Let's trace it. Your instance in EU West 1 VPC, say 10.2.1.50, sends a packet to 10.1.1.1.100 in US East 1. First, the packet hits the VPC's route table, which has a route for 10.1.0.0 out of 16 pointing to the transit gateway attachment. The packet enters the EU West 1 transit gateway.
And then the transit gateway looks at its own route table?
Exactly. The transit gateway route table has a route for 10.1.0.0 out of 16 pointing to the peering attachment. The packet crosses AWS's backbone to the US East 1 transit gateway. The transit gateway then consults its route table, finds 10.1.0.0 out of 16 pointing to the VPC attachment, and delivers the packet.
That's 4 route table lookups for a single packet. VPC route table, source transit gateway, destination transit gateway, and destination VPC route table.
Exactly right. 4 lookups for that one packet's journey from source to destination. Now, for a complete round-trip communication, the response packet goes through its own 4 lookups in the reverse direction, so you need routes configured correctly in both directions. This is where that fintech company failed. They had the forward path configured but missed a route for the return traffic, so response packets had nowhere to go.
Now I want to understand the latency implications. You mentioned AWS's backbone network. How much latency are we talking about?
This varies significantly by region pair, and I'd recommend measuring it yourself rather than relying on ballpark figures. AWS publishes inter-region latency data in CloudWatch, and you can also find metrics in their documentation. The key point is that transatlantic connections like US East 1 to EU West 1 will have noticeably higher latency than connections within the same continent. Always measure for your specific use case, because these numbers can change as AWS updates their backbone infrastructure.
That makes sense. If my application makes 10 sequential API calls to a service in another region, even modest latency adds up quickly.
This is why architects need to think carefully about what traffic actually needs to cross regions. Transit gateway peering is fantastic for disaster recovery, data replication, and centralized services, but it's not a substitute for deploying your application stack in each region where you have users.
What about bandwidth? Is there a limit on how much data I can push through a peering connection?
Transit gateway bandwidth is a bit nuanced. The limits apply per availability zone per attachment, not just per attachment overall. AWS documentation has the current figures, and they've evolved over time, so I'd recommend checking the latest documentation rather than memorizing specific numbers. Your actual throughput will also depend on factors like instance types, how well your traffic distributes across flows, and whether you're hitting any other bottlenecks. For peering connections specifically, AWS doesn't publish hard limits, but in practice you can push substantial traffic. The key constraint is usually cost, since you pay per gigabyte of data processed.
Speaking of cost, how does the pricing work?
You pay for 3 main components: the Transit Gateway Attachment Hourly Fee, the Data Processing Fee per gigabyte, and for peering specifically, data transfer charges between regions. I'd point you to the AWS pricing page for current numbers since these change over time. One important detail that catches people off guard: with peering attachments, data processing is charged at both transit gateways, not just one, so factor that into your cost estimates.
So if I'm replicating significant data between regions, I need to account for processing fees on both sides, plus the inter-region transfer costs.
Right, and this is where routing architecture decisions have real financial impact. If you're routing traffic through an intermediate region unnecessarily, you're paying multiple times for that data transfer.
Let's talk about more complex architectures. What if I have transit gateways in 3 regions and I want full connectivity?
You have 2 main options: full mesh peering or hub and spoke. With full mesh, you create peering connections between all pairs. 3 regions means 3 peering connections. 4 regions means 6. The formula is the same as VPC peering.
And hub and spoke means picking one region as the central hub?
Exactly. All traffic between spoke regions flows through the hub. This simplifies management but introduces a latency penalty. If US East 1 is your hub, traffic from EU West 1 to App Southeast 1 has to traverse 2 peering connections instead of 1 direct connection.
That could add significant latency. We're talking about potentially doubling the round-trip time.
Correct. For that EU West 1 to App Southeast 1 path, you're adding the latency of 2 hops instead of 1 direct connection. The trade-off is operational simplicity versus performance.
How do I decide which architecture to use?
Analyze your traffic patterns. If 90% of your inter-region traffic is between each spoke and the hub, hub and spoke makes sense. If you have significant spoke-to-spoke traffic, especially latency-sensitive traffic, full mesh is worth the additional complexity.
What about the routing tables in a hub and spoke model? That seems like it could get complicated.
It does require careful planning. In your hub transit gateway, you need routes for every spoke CIDR blocks pointing to the appropriate peering attachment. In each spoke, you typically have a default route or summary routes pointing to the hub. The key is using route table associations and propagations correctly.
Can you give me a concrete example with actual CIDR blocks?
Sure. Let's say US East 1 is your hub with VPCs using 10.0.0.0 out of 16 and 10.1.0.0 out of 16. EU West 1 is a spoke with 10.10.0.0 out of 16 and 10.11.0.0 out of 16. App Southeast 1 is another spoke with 10.20.0.0 out of 16. In the hub transit gateway route table, you'd have static routes, 10.10.0.0 out of 15 pointing to the EU West 1 peering attachment, and 10.20.0.0 out of 16 pointing to the App Southeast 1 peering attachment.
Wait, You use 10.10.0.0 out of 15 instead of two separate /16 routes. That's route summarization?
Exactly. 10.10.0.0 out of 15 covers both 10.10.0.0 out of 16 and 10.11.0.0 out of 16. Summarization reduces the number of routes you need to manage and makes your route tables cleaner. But you need to plan your CIDR allocations to allow for summarization.
What's a common mistake people make with CIDR planning?
The biggest one is not leaving room for growth. Someone allocates 10.1.0.0 out of 16 to region A and 10.2.0.0 out of 16 to region B, thinking they're being organized. But then region A needs more address space, and 10.3.0.0 out of 16 is already assigned elsewhere. Now you can't summarize region A's routes cleanly.
So the recommendation is to allocate larger blocks per region even if you don't need them immediately?
The principle is sound, but you need to think about your total address space requirements first. The 10.0.0.0 out of 8 private range only has 16/12 blocks total. If you're allocating /12 blocks per region, you can only support 16 regions, and that's before accounting for on-premises networks, acquired companies, or partner connectivity. So before committing to large regional allocations, map out your entire organization's address space needs. Some organizations find that /14 or /16 blocks per region work better for their scale.
Let's talk about that asymmetric routing problem you mentioned at the beginning. How does that happen with transit gateway peering?
It typically happens when you have multiple paths between regions. Say you have transit gateway peering and also a direct connect connection that spans regions. If your route tables aren't carefully configured, outbound traffic might take the transit gateway path while return traffic comes back via direct connect.
And stateful devices like firewalls or NAT gateways would see packets that don't match any existing connection state.
Precisely. The firewall sees a TCP SYN ACK packet but never saw the original SYN, so it drops it as invalid. The fix is ensuring symmetric routing through careful route configuration. Transit gateway route selection follows a specific order. Longest prefix match wins first. If prefixes are equal length, static routes are preferred over propagated routes. For propagated routes with the same prefix, VPC attachments take precedence over direct connect gateway attachments, which take precedence over site-to-site VPN attachments. If routes are still tied after all that, traffic gets distributed across the attachments.
That's really specific. Good to know there's a deterministic order.
It's critical for troubleshooting. Understanding that hierarchy helps you predict which path traffic will take and design your routes accordingly.
How do I verify my routing is symmetric before it causes an outage?
AWS provides VPC Reachability Analyzer and Transit Gateway Network Manager. Reachability Analyzer is a configuration analysis tool. It examines your network configuration to determine whether a path can exist between two endpoints and identifies which configuration elements are in that path. It's great for catching misconfigurations like missing routes or security group rules.
So it's analyzing the configuration, not tracing actual packets.
Exactly. It's static analysis, not real-time packet tracing. It won't tell you about transient issues or actual traffic behavior, but it's excellent for validating that your routing configuration is correct before you deploy. For actual packet-level visibility, you look at VPC traffic mirroring or third-party network monitoring tools. Network Manager gives you a global view of your transit gateway topology and can help identify routing anomalies across your network.
Let's wrap up with the key takeaways. What are the 3 or 4 things I absolutely need to remember about transit gateway inter-region peering?
First, routes do not propagate across peering connections. You must configure static routes manually or through automation. Second, plan your CIDR allocation for summarization from day one, but consider your total address space needs before committing to very large regional blocks. Third, understand the latency implications of your routing architecture. Hub and spoke is simpler but adds latency for spoke-to-spoke traffic.
And fourth,
Always verify symmetric routing, especially when you have multiple connectivity options. Use Reachability Analyzer to validate your configuration in both directions before you deploy to production. That fintech company I mentioned would have caught their missing return route in 5 minutes with that tool.
this has been incredibly helpful. I feel like I actually understand how packets flow across regions now, not just how to click buttons in the console.
That's the goal. Understanding the mechanics lets you troubleshoot problems and design better architectures. Thanks for joining us on Cloudcast, and we'll see you next time when we dive into Transit Gateway Connect attachments and SD-WAN integration.